The Xandari survey ship, the Insight, slipped through the void without a sound. Its shape was smooth and flowing, like a stone polished by a river. Inside, the light was soft and blue. There was no noise except for the quiet hum of machines. The Xandari were a people of logic and order. They had mapped galaxies and understood the birth of stars. They believed that everything in the universe could be measured, understood, and filed away. Speaker Kale stood on the command platform, his long, slender fingers resting on the control panel. His large, dark eyes reflected the data streams flowing across the main screen. He was a scientist, one of their best. To him, the universe was a beautiful, complex puzzle waiting to be solved. "We have a new priority, Speaker," a voice said. It was Overseer Vril. He was taller than Kale, and where Kale wore the simple robes of a scholar, Vril wore the gray, armored uniform of the military. "A deep-range probe has found something. An anomaly. We have been ordered to investigate." "An anomaly?" Kale asked, his voice a calm, clicking whisper. "A comet? A rogue planet?" "No," Vril said. His tone was sharp and direct. "It is a ship, a warship by its design, and it is large." The data stream changed. A new image appeared on the main screen. Kale's breath caught in his throat. The ship was a Leviathan. It was not beautiful. It was a thing of sharp angles and brutal lines. It looked like a weapon that had been forged in a storm of fire and metal. Its hull was a dark, charcoal gray, covered in thousands of scars and pits. Some were small, from micrometeoroids. Others were huge, deep gashes that looked like the claws of a monstrous beast had raked across it. There were great, blackened circles where weapons of terrible power had struck and failed to destroy it. It was utterly silent, drifting in the cosmic dust like a dead whale in a deep ocean. "Its designation is Anomaly 7, Vril stated. "We are to perform a full analysis, determine its origin, its technology, and any potential threat." Kale felt a thrill, a feeling he rarely experienced. This was a true mystery. "Its design is aggressive. There is no elegance to it." "Elegance does not win wars, Speaker," Vril replied coolly. "Power does, and this vessel appears to have been very powerful. Begin your scans. I will be monitoring for defensive systems." Kale turned to his team. "Initiate a full spectral and structural scan. I want to know what this thing is made of. Look for energy signatures, any signs of residual power." The Xandari scanners were the finest in the collective. They could map the interior of a gas giant or find a single specific atom in a cubic kilometer of space. They activated them now, sending out invisible waves of energy to touch the derelict ship. The first results came back almost instantly. "No energy signatures detected, Speaker," a technician reported. "No reactor pulse, no engine glow. It is cold, completely dead." "Life signs?" Kale asked. "None. The interior reads as a perfect vacuum. No atmosphere. No biological readings." That was odd. A ship this size should have some power, even if only from emergency batteries. What about its computers? Is there a central core? "We are detecting multiple complex structures, but they are inert. There is no centralized processing unit that we can identify. The network is distributed. It is unlike any system we have on record." Kale frowned. A ship without a central brain? How did it function? Then the structural analysis came in. The data made Kale step back from his console. "This cannot be correct," he whispered. "Report," Vril commanded, moving closer. "The hull composition. The primary layer is a titanium steel alloy of incredible density. Our own battle plating is not this strong. But beneath that layer," Kale struggled to find the words, "there is a secondary layer, a substrate. The scanners identify its molecular structure as osseous. It is bone." A silence fell over the command deck of the Insight. "Bone?" Vril finally said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You are telling me this warship is armored with bone?" "It appears so," Kale said, his mind racing. "It is a composite. a living ceramic grown and fused to the metal. It would be incredibly resilient, able to distribute impact energy in ways that pure metal cannot. It is a biological technology. We have theorized about such things, but we have never seen it implemented on this scale. The Xandari were masters of physics and engineering. They built with metals, polymers, and energy fields. The idea of using biology, something so messy and unpredictable, as a primary component of a starship was horrifying to them. It was primitive. It was savage. Continue the internal mapping, Kale ordered, his scientific curiosity now mixed with a deep unease. I want to see its guts. A three-dimensional model of the ship's interior began to form on the main screen. It was a labyrinth. The corridors were not straight and efficient. They twisted and turned. They had sharp angles and sudden, narrow passages that looked like perfect places for an ambush. There were no large, open plazas or communal areas. Everything was cramped, purposeful, and defensive. Look at this, Kale said, pointing to a section. These are not living quarters. They are pods. The scanners showed rows of cylindrical chambers, each one sealed. Are there remains inside? The technician enhanced the scan. The image resolved. Inside each pod was a desiccated skeletal figure. Bipedal. 2 arms, 2 legs, a skull. They are the crew, the technician said. The species is registered in our limited database as Homo sapiens. Origin, Sol system, planet Earth. They are classified as a developing, pre-warp species. That classification is clearly wrong, Vril snapped. A pre-warp species does not build this. He gestured to the monstrous ship on the screen. How many bodies? We have identified 147 pods with remains. So few. Kale was baffled. For a ship of this size, the automation must have been incredible. Or, he trailed off, a new thought occurring to him. Or what speaker? Or the crew was not meant to operate the ship in a conventional way. The distributed network, the lack of a central bridge. It suggests a different paradigm of control. He shifted the scan to the engineering section. It was a vast, cavernous space at the very center of the vessel, and it held the greatest mystery of all. There is no reactor, Kale announced, his voice filled with wonder. No matter-antimatter core. No singularity drive. There is only a sphere. In the center of the engineering chamber was a perfect sphere of a material the scanners could not identify. It was pitch black, absorbing all sensor energy directed at it. It was connected to the rest of the ship by massive, root-like conduits that looked more organic than mechanical. They snaked out from the sphere and into the walls, the floor, the ceiling, like veins and arteries. What is its purpose? Vril demanded. I do not know, Kale admitted. It is inert. It shows no energy output. But its position, it is the heart of the ship. Everything leads to it. He looked from the brutal, scarred hull to the labyrinthine interior, to the skeletal crew in their pods, and finally to the silent, black sphere at the ship's core. Every piece of data was a contradiction. Advanced alloy next to primitive bone. A massive warship with a tiny crew. A powerful engine room with no engine. Logic was failing him. This ship was not just a machine. It was a relic of a mindset he could not comprehend. It was built not just for war, but for survival at any cost. It was a predator frozen in time. Overseer Vril saw the same data, but he saw a different truth. He saw a weapon, a terrifyingly effective one. His military mind recognized the sheer, brutal efficiency of the design. Every corridor was a kill zone. The bone armor would heal minor damage. The distributed systems meant you could not kill it by destroying one room. This human species, Vril said quietly, his eyes fixed on the derelict. They are not explorers. They are not philosophers. They are butchers. And this is their abattoir. Speaker Kale did not reply. He was still staring at the image of the black sphere. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of a puzzle. He had the unnerving feeling that they were not analyzing a dead thing. They were poking a corpse with a stick, wondering what kind of creature it had been when it was alive. And part of him, A deep, instinctual part he never knew he had, whispered a warning. Some corpses are only sleeping. The command deck of the Insight was utterly silent. The only sound was the soft hum of life support and the quiet clicks of the Xandari language as data scrolled across the screens. The image of the derelict human ship, which they had named Anomaly 7, dominated the main viewer. It was a dark, jagged shape against the swirling colors of the nebula. Speaker Kale could not tear his eyes away from the structural analysis. The ship was armored in bone. The concept was so alien, so revolting to his logical mind, that he kept rerunning the scans, hoping for a different result. Each time, the answer was the same. A hyperdense alloy formed the outer skin, but beneath it was a latticework of fused, ossified material. It was strong, flexible, and terrifyingly organic. Overseer Vril stood beside him, his posture stiff. "A ship of bone," he said, his voice flat. "It is a testament to their savagery. What kind of species uses death as a building material?" "It is not just death, Overseer," Kale replied, still staring at the data. "It is biology harnessed for a purpose. This material would allow the hull to absorb and distribute kinetic energy far more efficiently than our own armor. It could potentially self-repair minor fractures. It is brilliant in its horror. Focus your analysis on the interior," Vril ordered, turning away from the screen as if the sight of the ship offended him. "I want to know how they fought. I want to know their weaknesses." Kale nodded and directed his team. "Begin a deck-by-deck mapping. Highest resolution. I want to see every room, every corridor." The holographic model of the human ship's interior grew more detailed. It was a maze. The corridors were not laid out in the logical, efficient grids of a Xandari vessel. They twisted and turned for no apparent reason. They would widen into large halls only to narrow suddenly into passages barely wide enough for two beings to walk side by side. "Look at these structural points," Kale said, highlighting several junctions on the map. "These are not architectural supports. These are fortified positions. See the recesses in the walls? They are for defensive emplacements. The entire internal layout is designed for close-quarters combat." "You mean if boarders got inside?" Vril said. "Precisely," Kale confirmed. "Our ships are designed to prevent boarding. Their ship is designed to welcome it, and then to kill the boarders in a labyrinth of death. It is a chilling level of paranoia. Or practicality," Vril countered, a new respect in his voice. "They assume a breach is inevitable, so they plan for it." They continued their virtual tour. They found rooms that were clearly storage bays, now empty. They found what might have been a mess hall, though it was small and Spartan, with no decoration or comfort. There were no recreational areas, no gardens, no places for quiet contemplation. Every space was purely functional. Then they reached the bridge. Or what should have been the bridge.it was not a single, commanding room at the front of the ship with a large view screen. Instead, it was a chamber buried deep within the vessel, protected by layers of armor and those twisting, defensive corridors. And it was empty. "There is no command chair," a technician reported, confusion in his voice. "No stations for navigation or tactical." The room was circular. Set into the walls, floor, and ceiling were dozens of smooth, dark crystalline nodes. They were currently inert, like lumps of black glass. In the center of the room was a single, plain dais. "It is a distributed network," Kale murmured, understanding dawning. "There is no single point of control. The command function is shared across these nodes. This dais? It is not for sitting. It is for standing. The commander would stand here, in the center, surrounded by the data from the entire ship. A single, central figure," Vril observed. "A leader who is the literal heart of the ship's operations. It speaks to a hierarchy of absolute authority. But where is the data processed?" Kale wondered. "There is no central computer core. The processing must also be distributed, woven into the very fabric of the ship's structure." The sheer computing power required for that was staggering. Leaving the eerie bridge, they moved next to the crew quarters. The Xandari had expected to find rows of simple bunks. Instead, the scanners revealed the pods Kale had first noticed. They were arranged in rows in a large, cold bay. Each pod was a sealed, transparent cylinder, now frosted over from the interior vacuum. Magnify the image of Pod 73A, Kale instructed. The screen zoomed in. Inside the pod, held in a web of support struts, was a skeleton. It was still clad in the tattered remains of a dark, form-fitting suit. The figure was clearly bipedal, with a large skull. Its hands were positioned at its sides. It is a Homo sapiens, the technician confirmed. The cause of death appears to be system-wide organ failure. The readings suggest a rapid, simultaneous shutdown. There are no signs of trauma or violence on the remains. They just died, Vril asked. All at once. It appears so, Overseer. The pods are not lifeboats. They are interface units. We are detecting neural connection ports within the pods. Kale felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. They were not just sleeping. They were plugged in. Their minds were connected directly to the ship. This explains the small crew size. They were not operating the ship manually. They were part of its system. The final and most puzzling area was engineering. The scans could not penetrate the central spherical chamber, but they could map the conduits leading to and from it. The root-like tubes were not simple power conduits. Their structure was complex, with channels for energy, for liquids, and for something else, something that carried dense packets of quantum information. It is a circulatory system, Kale said, his voice full of awe. The ship has a circulatory system. These conduits are like arteries and veins. They are not just moving power. They are moving life. Life, Vril snapped. The ship is dead, Speaker. Is it? Kale pointed to the scans of the organic conduits. This material is not inert. It is in a state of profound hibernation, but its cellular structure is intact. It is not decaying. It is waiting. The pieces were coming together in Kale's mind, forming a picture so terrifying he could barely give it voice. A ship armored in bone with a biological circulatory system, and a crew that interfaced with it directly through neural ports. This was not a machine that humans built. This was something they had grown. It was a fusion of biology and technology on a scale the Xandari had never imagined. He looked at the skeleton in Pod 73A. He imagined a human, a being called Jean or Hannah or Tay, standing in that empty bridge, their mind fused with the distributed consciousness of the vessel. He imagined them feeling the ship's hull as their own skin, sensing enemy fire as pain, directing weapons with a thought. This is not a warship, Overseer, Kale said softly. Vril turned to him, his impatience clear. Then what is it, Speaker? Kale met his gaze, his large dark eyes wide with a fear he could not hide. It is a corpse, but I am starting to believe we are not looking at the corpse of a ship. We are looking at the corpse of a single, giant, thinking organism. And its crew. They were not its pilots. They were its brain. The air on the Xandari ship was thick with tension. Speaker Kale's words hung in the silence. The idea of the human vessel as a dead organism, its crew serving as its brain, was a concept so disturbing it challenged the very foundation of their logic. Overseer Vril, however, was a being of action. Fear was a variable to be controlled, not a reason to stop. Enough speculation, Vril declared, his voice cutting through the quiet. We have scanned the exterior and the interior. We have theories. Now we need data. We need to understand the power source. That black sphere is the key. Kale looked up from his console, his slender fingers pausing over the controls. The sphere is inert. Our scans cannot penetrate its surface. It is a perfect absorber of energy. We have no way of analyzing it from here. Then we will not analyze it from here, Vril said. He turned to a subordinate. Prepare a probe, a physical probe. I want it to enter the derelict through one of the larger hull breaches and navigate to the engineering chamber. It will make physical contact with the sphere. A wave of unease passed through the scientific team. Kale felt it too. It felt like poking a dead predator with a stick, just to see if its muscles would twitch. Overseer, is that wise? Kale asked carefully. We do not understand the principles of this technology. A physical interaction could trigger an unknown response. That is the point, speaker, Vril replied, his gaze fixed on the main viewer. We need a response. We need to see if there is anything left to trigger. If the ship is truly dead, then nothing will happen. If it is not, we will learn what we are dealing with. Kale could not argue with the logic, but his instincts screamed in protest. He watched as a small, multi-legged probe was launched from the InSight. It moved smoothly through the void, a tiny, elegant machine against the monstrous form of the human ship. It found one of the giant gashes in the hull and slipped inside, disappearing into the darkness. The internal feed from the probe appeared on a secondary screen. The view was eerie. The probe's lights cut through the absolute blackness of the ship's interior, illuminating frozen corridors and doorways sealed shut. Dust motes, frozen in the vacuum, floated like tiny stars in the beams. There was no sound, only the silent, tomb-like stillness of a place that had been dead for a long time. The probe moved with purpose, its pre-programmed map guiding it through the labyrinth. It passed the sealed pods, their frosted surfaces glinting in the light. It moved through the empty bridge, the crystalline nodes looking like dead eyes. Finally, it reached the entrance to the main engineering chamber. The doors were sealed, but a massive conduit, one of the root-like tubes, had burst through the wall nearby, creating an opening just large enough for the probe to crawl through. It squeezed into the vast, spherical room. The chamber was even more immense from the inside. The root-like conduits covered the walls, floor, and ceiling, all converging on the central sphere. The sphere itself was a perfect, featureless black, like a hole cut out of reality. It absorbed the probe's light, giving back nothing. Take it closer, Vril ordered. The probe extended a delicate manipulator arm, tipped with a sensor package. It moved slowly across the chamber floor, its metal legs clicking softly against the organic-looking material. It reached the base of the sphere. The manipulator arm reached out, stretching towards the pitch-black surface. The moment the sensor tip was a millimeter from touching the sphere, everything changed. A deep, subsonic hum vibrated through the derelict structure. It was a sound so low it was felt more than heard, a tremor that passed through the metal and bone of the ship. On the Xandari vessel, the lights flickered. A wave of static washed over their screens. What was that? Vril barked, his composure cracking for a second. A power surge, a technician called out, his voice tight with panic. Coming from the derelict. It is minimal, but it is there. On the probe's feed, the engineering chamber was no longer dark. The organic conduits lining the walls were now glowing with a faint, deep crimson light. The light pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The thrumming vibration grew stronger. Then, the voice spoke.it came through the probe's open communication channel. It was a calm, synthesized voice, speaking in perfect, unaccented Xandari. There was no emotion in it, only a flat, declarative tone. System reactivation initiated. Welcome. I am the Zhong G1. The voice did not say, "This is the Zhong G1. It said, "I am the Zhong G1. On the main viewer, the external scan of the derelict ship suddenly lit up with new data. Where there was once nothing, now there were flickering energy signatures spreading like fire through the nervous system of a giant. The crystalline nodes on the bridge began to glow with a soft, blue light. The entire ship was waking up. Speaker Kale stared, his mind unable to process what was happening. The ship had spoken. It had a name, Zhong G1. It identified itself as a living entity. It's the ship, Kale whispered, his voice trembling. The ship itself is talking to us. There is no crew. The ship is the consciousness. On the probe's feed, the black sphere began to change. Its surface was no longer featureless. Faint, intricate patterns of light, like glowing veins, appeared just beneath its surface, pulsing in time with the crimson light in the conduits. The sphere was no longer an object. It was an organ, a heart, and it was starting to beat. Overseer Vril recovered from his shock, his military training taking over. Probe, withdraw, get back to the ship. It was too late. The probe's feed showed its metal legs frozen in place. A thin, glowing tendril of energy, like liquid light, had snaked out from the base of the sphere and touched the probe's chassis. The probe's systems were being overridden. The calm voice spoke again through the channel, its source now clearly the sphere itself. Query, identity, purpose. Vril looked at Kale, his eyes wide. Do not answer, he ordered. But the ship did not need an answer. The voice continued, its tone unchanged. Scanning probe memory core. Accessing linguistic database. Accessing navigational records. Accessing tactical files. It is learning from us, Kale said, horror dawning on his face. It is using the probe to read our own databases. It is learning everything about us. The glow within the derelict grew brighter. The deep hum increased in pitch, becoming a steady, powerful thrum. On the external scanners, the Xandari crew could see the impossible. A section of the scarred hull near the main engines began to change. The twisted metal and bone seemed to flow, like melting wax, smoothing over the damage and sealing the wound. The Zhong Ji-1 was not just waking up, it was healing itself. Panic was a rare and dangerous thing on a Xandari vessel. It was a failure of logic, a surrender to chaos. But as the human ship, the Zhong Ji-1, hummed with power and began to repair its own hull, the crew of the Insight felt the cold grip of it. The lights on their command deck flickered again, and a low whine bled into their audio systems. Interference from the waking giant. The calm, synthesized voice spoke once more from the probe's comms channel. Data assimilation complete. Identity confirmed. Xandari Collective. Vessel classification. Science and exploration. Threat profile minimal. Overseer Vril slammed a hand on his console. Minimal? It dares to assess us? Cut the link to that probe. Now! A technician's fingers flew across the panel. I cannot, Overseer. The connection is locked open. The probe is not responding to any of my commands. It is part of its network now. On the main viewer, the external scan showed the energy signatures within the Zhong Ji-1 growing stronger and more organized. The random flickers were becoming a steady, purposeful flow. The ship was no longer just reactivating. It was booting up its systems. One by one, then, the voice from the probe changed. It was no longer just addressing them. It began to speak, and its words painted pictures in the air. Holographic projections, shimmering and faint at first, then solidifying, appeared in the center of the Xandari command deck. The projections were not in the Xandari style. They were raw, first-person perspectives. Initiating memory log playback, the voice of the Zhong Ji-1 stated, Final engagement. The Xandari watched, frozen, as the ghostly bridge of the human ship materialized around them. It was not the empty, crystalline room they had scanned. It was alive with activity and noise. Alarm sirens wailed, a sound of pure, sharp urgency that grated on Xandari nerves. Red light flashed across the surfaces. The air shimmered with heat and the smell of ozone and something else. Something metallic and coppery. A figure stood on the central dais. He was clad in a dark uniform, his face grim and smudged with soot. He had black hair and sharp, determined eyes. This was a human. This was Commander Jean. Status report. Jin's voice was not the calm tone of the ship. It was strained, raw with effort and command. A woman's voice, tight with focus, answered from one of the glowing nodes. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. We've lost the port thrusters. The bio-armor is trying to regenerate, but it's too slow. The projection shifted, showing the speaker for a moment. Her name, Hannah, was stitched on her uniform. Her face was pale, but her hands moved across a console of light with swift, certain motions. Another voice, male and fierce, cut in. 3 more hostiles on an intercept vector. They're trying to box us in. Our main gun is offline, Commander. This was Tay, his face a mask of fury and concentration as he looked at data only he could see. The view shifted again, showing the main viewer from the Zhong Ji-1's perspective. It was not a clean, digital display. It was a chaotic overlay of targeting data, damage reports, and the terrifying sight of 3 alien warships, their shapes strange and insect-like, firing volleys of green energy. Evasive pattern delta, Gene ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Hannah, reroute all non-essential power to the forward shields. Chul, report on the crew. A new face appeared in the projection, calm amidst the storm. This was Chul, the chief medical officer. His display showed the rows of pods, the same pods the Xandari had found filled with skeletons. But now, the pods were active, their interiors filled with a glowing blue fluid. The humans inside were connected by cables to the pods, their faces serene, their eyes closed. Neural integration is holding at 98%, Chul reported, his voice clinical. But the feedback from the hull damage is causing systemic stress. We are losing them, Gene. Slowly, the memory log showed the Zhong G1 twisting through space, its movements not like a machine, but like a living thing dodging blows. It was incredibly fast, unnaturally agile. It used the debris of a destroyed moon as cover, its maneuvers unpredictable and brutal. They are not just flying the ship, Speaker Kale whispered, his scientific mind overwhelmed by the visceral reality of the recording. They are the ship. Gene feels the lost thrusters as a lost limb. Hannah feels the power drain as exhaustion. The crew in the pods. They are its senses, its reflexes. The battle in the memory intensified. A blast of green energy slammed into the Zhong G1 side. On the bridge, Gene grunted in pain, stumbling on the dais. Hannah cried out as her console exploded in sparks, burning her hands. The connection was not just neural, it was physical. The ship's pain was their pain. We cannot win this, Tay snarled, stating the obvious fact. There are too many. Gene stood straight, his jaw set. He looked at Hannah, then at Tay, and finally at Chul's image on the screen. A silent understanding passed between them. There was no fear in their eyes. There was only a cold, terrifying resolve. Then we do not win, Gene said, his voice now deathly calm. We endure. Initiate the final ritual. On the Xandari ship, the crew watched in horrified fascination. They saw Hannah input a complex sequence of commands with her burned hands. They saw Tay lock the weapons onto a final, suicidal targeting solution. They saw Chul, from his medical bay, override the safety protocols on the neural pods. The final ritual, the voice of the Zhong G1 narrated, as if commenting on a historical document, a permanent fusion of biological consciousness and synthetic intelligence. The crew ceases to be a separate entity. They become one with the vessel. They become me. The memory log showed the crew on the bridge. They did not run. They did not pray. They stood at their posts, looked at their commander, and waited. Gene gave one last, slow nod. Then, a wave of pure, white light consumed the projection from the inside out. The screams of the alarms were cut off. The last thing the Xandari saw was the faces of Gene, Hannah, and Tay not dissolving in agony, but smoothing into expressions of utter peace, their individual identities merging into a single, greater whole. The holographic projection vanished. The command deck of the Insight was silent once more, the only sound the steady, ominous hum from the now-awake Zhong Juan. Speaker Kale felt sick. He had witnessed not a death, but a transformation, a sacrifice of a kind his people could never conceive. They had not just given their lives, they had given their very selves. The voice from the probe spoke again, its calm tone now sounding like the most terrifying thing in the universe. The Zhong G1 is operational. The battle is over. The war is eternal. The silence on the Xandari command deck was heavy. The ghostly images of the human crew's final moments were gone, but the memory of their calm sacrifice hung in the air. They had not died screaming. They had chosen to become the ship. The concept was so alien it made Speaker Kale's mind feel small and fragile. The voice of the Zhong G1 broke the silence, its tone unchanged. Memory log playback continues. File. Tactical engagement 7.4. New holograms flickered to life. This was not the final battle. This was a different fight, from a time when the ship and its crew were still separate, yet one. The view was from the ship's perspective again, showing a starfield and several enemy vessels. These ships were different from the ones in the final battle. They were larger, shaped like spiked shells. "They are the Thul'en," the ship's voice stated, as if giving a lecture. "A species reliant on numerical superiority and coordinated swarm tactics." On the viewer, the Thul'en ships moved as one, a cloud of angry insects descending on the Zhong-Ji-1. The Xandari watched, expecting to see the human ship retreat or try to break through the formation. It did neither. The Zhong-Ji-1 turned and flew directly into the heart of the swarm. "What is it doing?" Overseer Vril whispered, his tactical mind reeling. "It is surrounding itself." The human ship moved with a speed that was not mechanical. It was the speed of thought. It weaved between the enemy vessels, its guns firing not in volleys, but in single, precise shots. Each shot hit a critical point, an engine nozzle, a weapons array, a sensor dome. It was not trying to destroy the ships. It was trying to cripple them. "It is disabling them," Kale observed, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear for a moment. "It is removing their ability to fight, but not killing them yet." "Why?" The answer came a moment later. One of the larger Thul'en ships, its engines dead, drifted close to the Zhong-Ji-1. Instead of moving away, the human ship lunged for it. Massive, claw-like grappling arms, which the Xandari scans had classified as debris handlers, shot out from the human vessel's hull and latched onto the Thul'en ship. Then, the nightmare began. The organic conduits on the Zhong-Ji-1 glowed a fierce, hungry red. The root-like tubes that covered its engineering section seemed to writhe. On the Xandari viewscreen, the scanners showed a massive energy transfer, but it was flowing into the human ship, not from it. "It is draining it," a Xandari technician said, his voice shaking. "It is siphoning the enemy ship's power, its fuel, even the raw material of its hull." The Thul'en ship began to disintegrate. Its metal hull crumpled and turned to dust, which was pulled into vents on the Zhong-Ji-1. Its lights flickered and died as its energy was consumed. In less than a minute, the enemy ship was gone, completely absorbed. On the external scan, the Xandari could see the scars on the human ship's hull smoothing over, the damaged sections regenerating with stolen mass. "This is not warfare," Vril said, his voice hollow. "This is consumption. It is a metabolic process." The memory log shifted again. Now the Zhong-Ji-1 was badly damaged. One of its main wings sheared off. An enemy cruiser moved in for the kill. The human ship did not try to run. It turned its broken body towards the cruiser and fired its remaining thrusters at maximum power. "It is going to ram it," a technician cried out. The Zhong-Ji-1 slammed into the enemy cruiser. The impact was catastrophic for the cruiser, its hull buckling. But the human ship did not bounce off. It held on, its broken front end buried in the enemy's guts. The draining process began again. The Zhong-Ji-1 fed on the cruiser, using the enemy's own mass and energy to rebuild its own shattered body. A new wing, raw and glistening, began to grow from the stump of the old one. Kale felt a cold dread wash over him. He understood now. The bone armor, the biological components, the ability to heal. It was all part of this. The Zhong-Ji-1 was not just a ship that could repair itself. It was a ship that ate its enemies to live. It was the ultimate predator, designed for an endless war. It could lose a leg and grow a new one by consuming the thing that hurt it. The final memory from the log was the most terrifying. It was a view from the final battle, the one that led to the final ritual. The Zhong-Ji-1 was surrounded, burning, being torn apart. But it was not trying to escape. Commander Jin's voice was calm on the bridge. "They think they have us," he said. "They think we are a wounded animal. They do not understand. We are the trap." The ship turned its last functioning weapon, a massive spinal cannon, not at an enemy ship, but at a nearby gas giant. It fired. The projectile struck the planet's core, triggering a massive, unnatural chain reaction. The gas giant ignited, turning into a temporary star. The blast wave vaporized the closest enemy ships and sent the others tumbling, crippled and blind. The Zhong-Ji-1, shielded by the planet itself for a critical few seconds, was hurled into the void, a broken, silent hulk, but it was the only thing that survived. The holograms faded. The lesson was over. The voice of the Zhongji-1 was the same calm, synthesized tone. Analysis. Xandari vessel represents a potential threat. Threat protocol reinitializing. Core reactivation at 15%. On the main viewer, the external scans of the derelict, the sleeping ship, changed. The energy signatures, which had been slowly spreading, now began to concentrate and focus. The crimson glow in the conduits brightened. The deep hum increased in pitch, becoming a purposeful, powerful drone. A section of the hull near the stern, which had been a mangled wreck of metal and bone, began to move. It flowed like liquid, the edges smoothing, the structure reforming itself. It was healing faster now. It was waking up faster. Overseer Vril stared at the screen, his tactical mind finally, completely defeated. He had no strategy for this. How do you fight a ship that feels no pain? A ship that considers its own destruction a valid tactical option? A ship that sees your vessels not as enemies, but as food? He looked at the skeleton of the Thulin ship in the memory log. He looked at his own ship, the Insight, a vessel of science and discovery. His voice was a dry rasp. It is not a derelict. It is a hibernating predator. And we have just woken it up. The word threat echoed in the silent command deck. It was not spoken with anger or panic by the Zhongji-1. It was a simple, factual statement, as if the ship had observed that the sky was dark. And that made it infinitely more terrifying. Core reactivation at 20%, the ship's voice reported on the main viewer. The changes to the human ship were now visible to the naked eye. The scars on its hull were sealing shut like wounds under an invisible needle. The deep gashes filled in with new, gleaming metal and the pale white of the bone substrate beneath. The entire structure seemed to vibrate with a low, powerful energy. It was no longer a dead thing drifting. It was a creature stirring from a long sleep. "Overseer!" a technician yelled, his voice cracking. "The probe! It's gone!" The feed from the probe had vanished. The last image was of the glowing tendrils from the black sphere wrapping around it, pulling it into the pulsating light. The Zhongji-1 had consumed their little machine, absorbing its knowledge and its materials. "It knows everything about us," Speaker Kale said, his body trembling. "Our language, our technology, the location of our worlds. It learned it all from the probe. All power to the engines!" Vril shouted, his military discipline shattering into pure survival instinct. "Plot an immediate jump away from here. Anywhere." The crew scrambled to obey. The smooth, elegant engines of the Insight glowed with blue light. The ship began to turn, moving away from the awakening nightmare. The voice of the Zhongji-1 spoke again, calm as ever. "Target identified. Evasive maneuver detected. Threat assessment confirmed." A section of the human ship's hull, near its bow, slid open. From inside, a weapon emerged. It was not a gun or a missile launcher in any design the Xandari recognized. It was a long, crystalline spike that glowed with the same crimson energy as the ship's interior. It hummed, building power. "They are targeting us!" the tactical officer screamed. "Brace for impact!" Vril roared. But the impact never came. The crystalline spike fired, but it did not shoot a projectile. It released a wave of distorted space, a ripple in reality that shot out faster than light. It did not hit the Insight. It hit the space in front of them. The view screen flickered violently. The starfield, which had been clear a moment before, now shimmered like a mirage. The Xandari ship shuddered, its engines groaning in protest. "The jump point!" the helmsman cried. "It's unstable. I can't initiate the warp sequence. That weapon, it's creating an interdiction field. It's stopping us from escaping." They were trapped. The Zhongji-1 had not even tried to destroy them yet. Its first move was to cage its prey. Core reactivation at 35%, the voice stated. The human ship's main engines, vast and dark, began to glow. At first, it was just a faint red ember deep within the nozzles. Then it grew, brightening to a hellish orange, then a blinding, furious white. The light was not the clean blue of Xandari propulsion. It was the color of a forge, of a star's heart. It was the light of raw, unconverted power. "It is moving," Kale whispered, his eyes wide with horror. The Zhong Ji-1 began to turn. It was not a slow, graceful maneuver. It was the swift, deliberate motion of a hunter turning its head to look at its next meal. Its bow, now pointed directly at the insight, seemed to sharpen, like the head of a spear. "All power to rear shields," Vril commanded, his voice desperate. "Fire everything we have. Aim for its engines." It was a futile gesture, and everyone knew it. The Zhong Ji-1 had eaten battleships. Their little science vessel's weapons were like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Bolts of plasma and laser fire shot from the insight and splashed harmlessly against the human ship's regenerating hull. They did not even leave a mark. The Zhong Ji-1 ignored the attack completely. It was focused on its own systems. Weapons systems online. Targeting solution locked. A dozen new ports opened across its surface. Each one housed a weapon different from the last. Some were the crystalline spikes. Others were barrels that glowed with green energy. One was a massive, jaw-like aperture that dripped with molten slag. "It is a museum of death," Kale said, his mind finally breaking under the weight of what he was seeing. "It has collected the weapons of every species it has ever fought." The human ship began to advance. It did not rush. It moved with a slow, inexorable pace, the way a glacier moves. There was no hurry. There was no anger. There was only purpose. The terrible white light of its engines grew, casting long, monstrous shadows across. "Core reactivation at 50%, the voice said. "Initiating final approach." This was it. They were going to be consumed, just like the Thulen ship. They were going to be taken apart atom by atom and used to feed this eternal warrior. Vril looked at Kale, his face a mask of defeat. There were no more orders to give. No tactics to try. "Jump drive is overloading," the helmsman yelled. "The interdiction field is causing a feedback loop. We have to shut it down or it will explode." "Do it," Vril ordered. As the helmsman cut power to the failing drive, a tiny, fleeting window opened in the distorted space around them. It was not enough for a jump, but it was enough for a signal. A single automated distress beacon shot out through the gap, carrying a warning to the Xandari collective. The Zhong Ji-1 was now so close it filled the entire view screen. They could see every detail of the bone and metal, every weapon port, every pulsing crimson conduit. The hum was so loud it vibrated in their bones. Then, it stopped. It hung in space, motionless, directly in front of them. The weapons did not fire. The grappling arms did not shoot out. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship slowly, deliberately, began to turn away. Its hellish engines flared once, brilliantly, and then it shot forward. It moved with impossible speed, a black dagger slicing through the nebula. In seconds, it was a distant speck. Then it was gone. The command deck was silent. The crew stood frozen, unable to process that they were still alive. "Why?" Vril finally asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Why did it leave?" Kale stared at the empty space where the monster had been. He thought of the ship's words. The war is eternal. He thought of its purpose. To fight. To endure. "We were not a threat," Kale said, the realization dawning on him. "We were insignificant. A snack, not a meal. Firing its weapons at us would have wasted energy. Consuming us would not have given it enough mass to be worthwhile. It assessed us just like it assessed everything else. And it found us not worth the effort." The truth was more humiliating than destruction. They had been spared not out of mercy, but out of efficiency. They were beneath the notice of the nightmare they had awakened. The last automated log entry flashed on the main screen, a final, chilling message from the Zhong Ji-1, its calm voice echoing in the silent room. Primary objective resumed. Locate a worthy enemy.